Welcome, everyone, to this week's AI ethics seminar, and welcome especially to today's speaker, Michał Wieczorek, who will talk to us about how to imagine educational AI. And from what I understand, Michał, you're calling in from Gothenburg, despite your affiliation at Dublin City University.
Yes, that's
Right?
correct.
Yes. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. This is a difficult presentation for me today because Alberto was supposed to be here as well, my co-author, but he had to cancel at a short notice. So if anything, is not up to the best standard, yeah, you can blame it on that. But I'll try to give you a general overview of our shared paper and discuss some of the ideas in it, which are basically uh, arose from a series of conversations we've had. I am a postdoc working on the ethics of using AI in schools, whereas Alberto is a philosopher of technology and media, and he works on the way AI is imagined and discussed. So over a series of conversations, as I said, we came to a realization that imaginaries of educational AI are not very present, or if they are present, they're quite lacking. And this has several severe consequences. So just to give you a broad introduction to the topic, you obviously know, especially since the advent of ChatGPT, is that AI companies are currently trying to revolutionize teaching and learning, as they say, by developing technologies that promise to tailor material to individual needs of students, automating parts of teachers' jobs, or analyzing educational data to optimize the delivery of content. And our idea is to discuss how the existing imaginaries of AI shape the practices and understanding of educational AI, and how the technology itself shapes the imaginary as well. But at the same time, we want to understand how is it the case that AI is not so prominent both in popular imagination and as a topic of philosophical deliberation. If you look at any journal devoted to philosophy and technology, you'll see lots of discussions about self-driving cars, facial recognition, medical AI, etc. But educational AI is not really a thing, even though well, most of us have finished some level of schooling, and should AI be deployed in schools, it would have vast social consequences. But for some reason, philosophers are not that interested, and the public isn't very interested either, although this has been changing with the advent of large language models, of course. So in this presentation, I'm going to cover several things. The first one is the lack of imaginaries of educational AI, or the low quality or inadequacy of existing imaginaries. In the second, I will show the concrete impacts that has on educational AI as it's being developed today. And I'm focusing on commercial applications, which are likely to end up in schools. And I conclude by showing some alternative imaginaries that can change how we think about what educational technology should be and what it should accomplish. And specifically looking at the case of the primer in Neil Stephenson's The Diamond Age. To start with, you probably have heard about Shilia Jasanov's definition of a social technical imaginary that is collectively held, institutionally stabilized, and publicly performed visions of desirable futures, animated by shared understandings of forms of social life and social order, attainable, true, and supportive of advances in science and technology. This is probably the most common definition of the concept. However, we argue that it is a bit too narrow and too static for our purposes, because first of all, it refers to institutionally stabilized imaginaries. And those are only a small portion of what's out there. It's easy to see them in government documents, great papers, UNESCO reports, etc. But there are also small communities of enthusiasts or individuals and fictional narratives that may be excluded from this definition in that sense. In the definition also, the imaginaries concern desirable futures. But as I'm going to show you, much of our thinking about technology and education is influenced by dystopian narratives or very appalling ideas or long rejected ideologies and theories that are sugar coated and then presented in the form of a new tech. And finally, it seems quite naive to think of social technical imaginaries in terms of shared understanding. I mean, they're shared as in they are intersubjective, but it would be false to say that they're shared as in we all subscribe to them. Rather, imaginaries are a site where the meaning of technology and education is contested, and there are many competing understandings at play here. So instead, we look at all kinds of text or images, static or moving, whether in full of fragments that crystallize a social technical vision. So this could be some narratives that are distributed across film and literature, but also official documents, newspaper articles, online forums, and scientific papers. That includes science fiction, of course, but it's not only science fiction. And those imaginaries, they can serve various purposes. They can be utopian or dystopian, trying to show desirable or undesirable feature. They might promote certain ideologies. They might be ironic, subversive, or just serve purely for entertainment. And in the context of educational technology, they play a key role, a particular AI today, in contemporary educational imaginaries. And what we argue is that there is a certain feedback loop at play. The way we think about technology in general shapes our understanding of education, and also our understanding of education shapes the kinds of technologies that are being developed. If you want to think about this in a more detailed way, Lina Ram has recently published a paper where she discusses educational images in general and technology plays a part. We can see that there are many different parts of this relationship between the technology, the problematizations of the issue that's people are trying to solve, the collective actors that are trying to address a specific issue, and finally the target populations that are going to be subject to an intervention, right? So in this sense, all those factors play into and influence each other. In more concrete terms, we argue that the existing imaginaries of educational AI are severely limited. That is, they play a key role in supporting or subverting the dominant problematizations and technological practices implemented by collective actors in relation to target groups. So in the context of technology, education is most often imagined as information, that is transmission and acquisition of knowledge. And it's worthwhile, Alberto likes to do it, to go back to the etymology of the term information, the idea of forming a brick of wax. So informing a student is transmitting information and shaping their character. But the very idea that I want to underline here is that when technologies are imagined in educational context, they merely serve to transmit information, make students acquire knowledge, and they serve to increase the efficiency at which it happens. And these kinds of imaginaries, as we argue, are limited and inadequate. And that limitation exists both in scope. So, as I'm saying, the content of those imaginaries is not satisfactory, but also they are limited in number. We've been spending some time looking at different examples in popular fiction, etc., about the narratives that are present there, and found some examples in science fiction that I want to show you. For example, the movie Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick, which is an interesting, obviously dystopian case where the main character, Alex, is conditioned to anti-violent behavior by, well, transmitting information. He's been shown a series of very rapid, violent images meant to demonstrate to him the ills of his actions, and in a subconscious fashion, this is supposed to change the way he behaves. It is a form of education, although maybe not education in the sense that we would typically perceive it. But here you can clearly see how technology can make possible this kind of information transmission that will change Alex's character. We can also think about the cartoon series The Jetsons, a much older example. Here, the School of the Future has a robot, but the robot basically functions the same way as a human teacher, although malfunctions all the time. However, the idea is still the same as the teaching in a very industrial, traditional setting. That is, children sit at benches, at desks, and the robot is basically trying to transmit information to them. And part of the joke in the Jetsons is that the students give out nonsense answers, and the robot accepts them. But it really shows the idea, ironically, of course, of how education is perceived by the public very often. An interesting short story by Isaac Asimov, that is Profession, highly recommended to read, shows a future in which all knowledge is transmitted directly to the brain through tapings. So people are expected to memorize it completely. They engage with a computer, which basically records information in their brain. The issue is that the main character is not very good at this because he starts to imagine new things. He's incompatible with the system. His brain is just not working in the way as is expected of it. So he is sent to a remote place to develop a different kind of career rather than what is envisioned in this imagination of technology and education. You probably have read Brave New World, and there's a very minor part of it where citizens are fed information in their sleep, right? This is the Huxley's fascination with sleep learning. So basically, the idea that our brains absorb information also while we are not awake. And in Brave New World, it is quickly determined that this is probably not the best for actual learning, but it is very good for class-based indoctrination. The characters in the novel are constantly being fed recordings of what they're supposed to believe, and then they wake up and believe that. But here, new modes of new forms of media, new forms of communications are being used to shape the character of people and have this twisted educational purpose. And perhaps my favorite example, and I'm going to show you the snippet from the movie in a second, is The Matrix, where the main character, Neo, is connected directly to a brain-computer interface, and the relevant knowledge is simply uploaded to his brain. This is the ultimate dream of educational technologists, as I'm going to show you in a few seconds. But here's a scene from the movie. See if it works. You can see the computer working something on Neo's brain and serialization. I know. Show me. This is the 15-second summary of technological imaginaries that play today in educational AI. However, this is not just a bunch of random science fiction stories, but the way we imagine and see technology in education has concrete impacts on the kinds of technologies that are being developed. Because first of all, who gets to make educational AI today and what AI is being adopted? First of all, maybe 5 years ago, it was possible to say that it is a very highly specialized subject of research, mostly done by academics. But as a result of the current AI hype, it is generalist technology companies that have begun to make greater inroads in education technologies. And if you look at who's being invited to talk about edtech on TV, for example, or on podcasts, etc., it's going to be people like Salman Khan, who I'm going to devote more attention to later, Sam Altman, Bill Gates, and others. But those people, they may be great technologies, but they have no pedagogical training, and they have little to no educational experience. Sal Khan is head of probably one of the biggest edtech companies in the world right now, the Khan Academy, and the extent of his educational experience is tutoring his family. And this is the authority that speaks about edtech today in places like CNN, MSNBC, and shapes the way we see education, the purpose of education in general. It is possible to argue, and I'm making that argument, that their products are not built on theories of learning, that is, empirically driven, theory-driven, scientific understanding of how we learn, why, and for what reasons, etc. But they are built on folk theories of learning, just a bunch of imaginaries, popular discourses about education poorly understood theories of learning, etc. I'm going to deal with that in a second. However, even though those products are developed in a very inadequate, unsatisfactory fashion, and by people who are probably not the best authorities on the subject, as a result of the existing power relations and commercial structures, it is those products that get adopted in schools. Think about ChatGPT not being an education technology, but being a general purpose tool. It was never designed for education in the first place. It ended up being used by students and adopted by many schools, and now OpenAI is leading this great push of with ChatGPT being framed as an educational tool. But that doesn't mean that ChatGPT is well suited to education. The same thing happens with Microsoft Copilot, etc. And what's also important is that those big tech companies, they're already in schools in the form of Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams. And it is easy for them to promote their products and make sure that more and more of them get adopted. So even though the educators and the general public might disagree about the intents and the ideas behind the education promoted through those tools, in the end, those are the things that policymakers are going to opt for. And it happens also in Swedish schools, as many of you may know. Because when you think about those proposals, those commercial educational AI, like ChatGPT, etc., and Canmingo from Khan Academic or Pilot, there is a list of ingredients that seems to be common among all of them. First of all, it's those imaginaries of education technology as I'm presenting them here. Learning is primarily framed in them as the acquisition of information. There are some scraps of genuine pedagogical theories. I'm going to show it to you in a few slides. But those pedagogical theories are often poorly understood. And the problems that they pose, the objective of learning they pose, are often reframed to suit the purposes of the company. There are also the affordances of technology, because AI is, at the end, is a very interesting tool for processing, generating, and transmitting data, information. And because of its affinity for these purposes, very often it happens that it's going to shape how education is seen and what is seen as the most important in education. Because many of those products that I'm discussing here are techno-solutionist in nature. And I understand this term following Tamer Shalom, among other people, as reframing the problem to fit the technology, making the product seem like the best possible answer. There are some genuine problems that edtech companies are trying to address, lack of access, low quality of education, etc. But very often they will present the problem in a way that makes it seem that a more efficient transmission and processing information is the right answer to all of the issues that they have been pointing to. So then we can take a look at what kind of education emerges out of this. We have tools that frame education primarily or exclusively as acquisition of knowledge, the filling of a pail from the title of this presentation. Those are individual tutoring systems, those are chatbots, and many other tools that are being developed today. Good education in this context equals improved learning gains. That is the mastery of the curriculum and higher test scores. There is a specific, folk fear of learning motivated by 1980s research in educational psychology that I'm going to get to as well. But again, it is a theory that is very poorly understood and poorly conceptualized. The overall idea is, again, we can make education better by increasing the efficiency with which information is transmitted and acquired. And other aspects of learning, character development, socialization, disciplinary aspects, etc., are largely ignored. And this provides a partial answer to one of the issues we have been struggling with while working this paper. Philosophers are not interested, probably, and the public is not so interested, because if we frame education merely as good education as acquisition of knowledge, and the main problem to be addressed as increasing the efficiency with which information is transmitted, it is a very boring problem to solve. It is a technical problem to solve. That is, techno-solutionism is the best answer to that, because there's very little space to pedagogical concepts that we might be interested in. There is very little space to discussing the impact of different technologies on students' character formation, for example. And this is one of the hypotheses why the ethical aspects, the pedagogical aspects of teaching and learning with AI are being ignored to a great extent today. To give you a more concrete example, this is a recent book by Sal Khan. If you haven't read it, I do not recommend doing so. It is not a great book, but it shows Khan's thinking about education. It seems to rest on two premises. The first one is that the traditional knowledge of learning in a classroom is inefficient because it is very bad at the acquisition of knowledge. Khan refers to Benjamin Bloom's two sigma problem. That is a study from the 1980s that showed that a group of students that was tutored on a one-to-one basis by human teachers performed much better in tests, well, two standard deviations better than their human peers, than their peers who were educated in a classroom environment. So the general idea is that one-to-one learning is much better. In Kant's narrative about it, what definitely disappears is the fact that there have been issues with replicating this study. We seem to struggle in doing so, even with highly qualified human teachers. And there is very little evidence showing that Bloom may have been right. But this is only one part of the story, right? Because another part of the story is that while students may be worse at acquiring knowledge and mastering the curriculum, performing standardized tests, etc., classroom learning is also an important environment for learning how to engage with your peers, right? Learn and create knowledge together. However, this is not the concern that Kant is pointing to, because the main issue for him is it is not possible to provide an individual tutor for everyone, right? If one-to-one tutoring is two standard deviation better, then according to him, we're doing a great disservice to our students by locking them in the classrooms and trying to teach them through traditional classroom-based styles in a group instruction format. So you might not be surprised that AI has been the solution all along. And it's quite interesting because in the book, there's a lot of self-aggrandizing talk about how he realized the wealth of learning that AI can offer. And that forced him to maybe semi-abandon the existing video-based learning that Khan Academy has offered. But now Khan Migo, that is a GPT-4-based learning assistant, individual tutor, is the solution to all ills of contemporary education. And look how the complex problem, how to efficiently teach for mastery, which is obviously one of the important problems in education, how to make sure that students acquire all the knowledge, learn all the skills, etc., and then demonstrate that knowledge and skills in standardized tests, quickly becomes simplified. And becomes simplified specifically to fit the technological solution that was in the mind of the proponent from the very beginning. The problem seems to be now simply that we don't have the resources to provide an individual tutor to everyone. Right? The issues about the replication of the study, the discussion about the goals of education in general, the value of mastery, etc., they disappear. It's all about how to transmit information most efficiently, and the answer is doing it in a one-on-one way, and AI is finally offering opportunity to do it at scale. This connects to many long-standing concerns about the banking conception of education, of lecturers just talking at students and not really engaging with real problems, etc. But the idea here is that, well, someone is still talking at students, but the issue so far has been that it wasn't AI. And in practice, Canmigo will pretend, for example, to be a literary character or a historical character and try to show the student a beautifully written rendition of Jay Gatsby, for example. As you can see, this is perhaps not the best tool in general, but what was supposed to be a conversational agent trying to engage a child with, well, content relevant to their education suddenly becomes just another, well, guy rambling at them and lecturing ceaselessly. This is only the introductory message. All the subsequent ones are longer, with Canmigo explaining the plot of the novel to the child. And I really like this graphic from Dan Meyer, a math education with a great Substack blog, who has shown that yes, part of it is someone just talking at students, and there is a new and shiny tool to do that every year, every 5 years. We've had online forums, we had watching videos, we had auto-graded quizzes as part of that. Now we have chatbots and individual tutors, but the thing that never changes is that children are supposed to do it on computers alone, right? It is always a computer with human contact being a afterthought or even an obstacle to quality learning. And again, the kind of imaginaries that Can and his peers present to us are woefully inadequate because there are so many missing parts, right? It is not enough to just memorize knowledge. Students need to use it as well. Human tutors do more than just transmit information. They are instrumental to student socialization. They show them how to manage interpersonal relationships, etc. Working together with peers and being exposed to social differences is also important in learning. And I recently finished a paper, hopefully will be out soon, about democratic education and the importance of classroom and interactive activities for living in a democratic fashion. And also we have to remember that schools serve an organizational and disciplinary function. Someone needs to mind the children during the working day, and it is not going to be a chatbot. But this part of education seems to disappear when Sal Khan or Sam Altman or Bill Gates talk about the future of education. It is all about computers, now artificial intelligence, and what it can do in the context of information and knowledge. But this is not the only way to imagine educational AI. And as already noted, there are not that many alternative examples, but there are some great ones. And the first one that I'm going to devote most attention to is Neil Stephenson's The Diamond Age. I believe 1990s novel about an alternative quasi-Victorian reality in which Nell, poor and struggling protagonist, stumbles upon a primer that is an interactive book that is powered by nanotechnology and artificial intelligence, etc. But the point of the primer is that an inventor created it to provide personalized education to his own daughter, although through plot shenanigans, it ended up in the hands of Nell. But the primer creates immersive stories and simulates situations that the reader might expect and asks the reader to go through them. It fosters the skills and knowledge that Nell might need to survive and thrive in the world. And in the process, it also teaches her about self-defense and critical thinking, and by creating this grand narrative to which Nell responds and shapes it together with the book. You can maybe see where this is going, but you'll be surprised. The idea is that through participating in this adventure, Nell faces moral and practical dilemmas, and the story evolves based on the choices that is made. But it has little to do with mere transmission of knowledge, despite the similarities that you might draw to ChatGPT, for example, and personalized learning. Because in practice, it creates a laboratory where Nell is able to experiment and through experimentation grow her identity, emotional intelligence, and critical thinking. And another important part of the primer is that the inventor very deliberately decided not to go for a robotic artificial voice. There is Miranda, an actor, who serves as the voice and the personality for Nell's primer. She's being given prompts to read, and she develops an emotional attachment with Nell by making sure that the story is told in a caring, compassionate way. And she becomes a kind of a surrogate mother. And it is this bond of love that cannot be replaced by technology. That I think is the story of the Diamond Age. And this is also why Nell and Miranda in the plot seek each other out in real life. And interestingly, when the same technological concept is deployed at scale in the book, through very impersonal means, that is artificial voices, etc., not the use of human actors, things go bad. I highly recommend the novel, but I'm not going to spoil the ending. But you can probably already anticipate that many enthusiasts of ChatGPT see it as a sort of primer. Here's one bit of ChatGPT bringing us closer to the Diamond Age. There's an Atlantic story about Neil Stephenson's most stunning prediction that he anticipated ChatGPT being this great technology that's going to change the way we educate. Or here is an actual example of someone trying to use ChatGPT to develop this kind of teaching story. Well, as you probably are not surprised, it turned out very bland and trite and not very educative, in my opinion. To give you some more concrete examples, this is a piece from Point 72 Ventures, that is a venture capital firm by Steve Cohen, a New York-based billionaire. And again, the argument here is that ChatGPT can bring the Diamond Age to life because it could help us build something like the primer now. Because for the author, it all comes down to the idea of individual tutoring. So you can see the same idea reappearing somewhere else. And take careful note in how the problem is being framed in this piece, right? Individual tutoring is great, but making time for a personalized study session with our children isn't always an option. And finding tutors can be difficult. And there are limited time windows in which tutors work. And you must have the means to afford these tutors. What could be the answer? I'm not going to respond to that because we can probably anticipate the answer that the author is posing right before asking readers to go to Point 72 with their great startup ideas for GPT-based educational tools. But ChatGPT is missing crucial functionality, and this is probably my favorite reference in my entire academic career, where I stumbled upon this, which is a Reddit Ask Me Anything thread with Neil Stephenson, the author of The Diamond Age, with someone saying, "My ultimate goal in life is to make the primer real. Anything you want to make sure I get it right." To which Stevenson's answered, "Kids need to get answers from humans who love them." And I think this is a very important part of the entire educational imaginary that quickly gets forgotten in the discussion surrounding education technology. Yes, learning is acquiring knowledge, it is acquiring skills, etc. But learning is so intimately involved with other people that trying to automate away those parts is an issue. Which leads me to a second example that I'm going to invoke here. And the question at the top is also a question to you, because we're still working on this paper. So if you have other examples of narratives that challenge this tech bro Silicon Valley thinking about education, we'll be happy to. But in the novel Clara and the Sun, education is probably not the main concern. The main character is Clara, an anthropomorphic robot that's designed as a human companion to a child, Josie, who has been uplifted. That is, her level of intelligence has been greatly increased, but at the cost of her health. Josie has a very poor immune system, and as such, she's not able to socialize so much with her peers. And there, Clara exists to perhaps fulfill Josie's emotional needs. This is how the story is framed at first. But if we look at it through educational means, we can see that Clara is extremely ignorant and naive. She knows very little about the external world. She worships the sun because she is powered by photovoltaic means, but she doesn't understand how, the solar system works and what can be found outside. And it turns out that Josie learns a lot about the world by looking at it through Clara's naive and ignorant eyes. She has to question her own assumptions when trying to answer Clara's questions. She has to explain and analyze how and why things work. So, in this sense, one of the imaginaries that we were interested in is what can you learn from an artificial intelligence that knows very little, right? So, in more practical terms, is it possible for AI to teach us anything if there is no predetermined outcome? And this is part of also another research project that we've been discussing. When you look at many of those educational chatbots, they often tout the idea of a Socratic dialogue, Socratic even being the name of a chatbot acquired by Google. But the issue with Socratic dialogue is that if you ever read one of the pieces by Plato where Socrates is the main character, he always knows where the interlocutor has to go and always ask those leading questions, trying to arrive at a specific outcome, right? And this is also what AI is trying to do. This is the kind of bit that we are trying to teach you. And I'm going to ask you questions, or I'm going just to lecture to get you to acquire this kind of information. But is it possible to design AI in a way that requires child or the student to arrive at new knowledge, a knowledge that hasn't been envisioned, in the design of the tool? And another narrative that we've been considering, again, not an educational book, but there is a book by Ian McEwan called Machines Like Me that tells a story of an alternative UK where Alan Turing is still very much alive and that has developed humanoid robots. And there is a very interesting scene at some point when Adam, the robot, is not capable of joining children in playing because the children play and make up rules as the game progresses, which is, contradictory to a machine because there are no patterns to be gleaned and learn from, etc., because it's just pure play and imagination. And our idea for this narrative is that it shows not what educational AI could be, but it is a powerful way of explaining what AI, as we understand today, cannot ever be, and shows the aspects of education, that is, for example, play and imagination, that may be very difficult to approximate and very difficult to replicate in a computerized form. But this is all I have for you. I think we have plenty of time for the Q&A and hope that the presentation was interesting to you. And I hope even more that you will have great examples of education being conceptualized in the context of AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michał. Let's give him a round of applause before going on with the Q&A. To me, this was super interesting because I realize I have some premises in my own view of teaching that you are challenging, and in particular the one that you ascribed to Salman Khan about one-on-one teaching being more efficient from the student perspective compared to teaching to a group. I always took this very much for granted, but you raise serious questions around this, it seems.
So I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that one-on-one learning is more efficient. I think there is some evidence. There is good, theoretical basis for thinking that. But what I take issue with is equating efficiency in this transmission of knowledge with good education of quality, right? And what happens in this techno-solutionist narrative is that this efficiency becomes the ultimate goal of education, and transmission of knowledge becomes, education as a whole, which is only part of the story. And this is what we want to challenge in the paper.
Right. So you think it's too one-dimensional?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because children still need to acquire knowledge, they need to learn those skills, etc. But there are other values that we need to recognize as being important to education.
Yes. Okay. Let me open the floor to questions from the audience. And I think that we are sufficiently few people in the room that it will work if you just grab the microphone and ask. Magnus, do you have something you want to add here?
I just put something in the chat.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
we hear you.
So yes, I think there's not a middle way perhaps, but yes, I think there are indeed cases where one-on-one is effective.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure that it is the full picture or the most sophisticated wasn't a good word, but the most qualitative, high qualitative way of learning. And then again, there are also learning outcomes that we cannot meet with one-on-one learning.
Yeah.
So I
And
think for Ed AI and for teachers generally, figuring out what is the best way for any one learning outcome with or without AI, that might be our challenge.
yeah, and this is precisely what disappears in the, tech-centric narratives that they're being pushed now in the media.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you. And that's also why I speak of folk theories of learning and poorly conceptualized scientific theories of learning being at play here, because like no genuine expert in mastery learning, following Bloom and that tradition would say that one-on-one is the answer to everything. But it suddenly does become an answer to everything in EdTech parlance.
Okay, very good. Do we have further questions? So you did mention towards the end, I don't recall what the quote came from, but someone had said that kids need to get answers from humans who love them,
Yeah.
or something like that. So I have several reflections on this one. One is that it's a bit of an ask to hope that, let's say, a secondary school teacher will actually love every single one of their pupils.
Hmm.
So this seems to be a critique that hits not only against new technologies in education, but actually the entire school system that we have today. Would you agree with that?
To some extent, yes. So the quote comes from Stevenson, the author of the Diamond Age,
Yes.
uh, uh, and it's like basically the underappreciated and under-recognized part of the message of the book. I do agree that the asking teachers to love the students may be a tall order, but I think most teachers care. And perhaps this is a better conceptualization of this relationship that needs to arise. And there are great philosophers who have devoted their entire careers to discussing this. Nell Noddings, for example, right? Discussing the importance of care, be, both of teachers for the students and students for the teachers, as being foundational for learning. And I think this is the relationship that we cannot overlook.
Right. Okay. So let's let Magnus into the discussion again here.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, there was something in that thread that you mentioned, somebody who wanted to build that
Mhm.
thing, and Stevenson's answer, something in that answer sort of kicked that idea that readers simply haven't seen the implied criticism of his piece.
Yeah, I think it happens a lot in science fiction, actually, where many of the stories that we recognize as satirical or dystopian, etc., suddenly become blueprints for this very expansionist and all-encompassing edtech that is being developed, right? So I
And
think, yeah.
and that's partly because of the imaginaries that we're already sort of part of educational AI.
Partly, I think I think obviously part of the reason will be sometimes poor learning comprehension, poor reading comprehension on the part of some people, of course. There are already pre-established notions of what education is as well. But also speaking about technology more broadly, there will be private companies that go into it, and they have commercial interests. So profit will very often be one of the motivators for a specific kind of tool being developed, right? I give you that snippet from that piece posted on Steve Cohen's venture company's website, right?
Yeah.
And they very clearly have specific financial incentives to fund startups that want to develop this specific kind of education. Because it is in a way easy, right? We already have machines that are very good at transmitting and processing information, right? With AI in general. And standardizing education, focusing on mastery is very easily quantifiable, making it even more appropriate to integrate with AI. And then they could be the first movers in this space and reframe the entire problem of how to teach in the age of AI or how to use AI for educational purposes to fit their own agenda, that is developing a tool that they can then extract value from.
Indeed. Um, I'm gonna have to leave a bit early. I'm sorry. This was very, very rewarding. I teach a course for engineering students, an evening course, basically a fiction class. I'm gonna have to bring in the Diamond Age.
Yeah, it's highly recommended as a read. If that's your only takeaway from this talk, even I would be very happy. Just read the Diamond Age.
Thank you very much.
You're
Thank you
going.
for your bye.
Thank you, Magnus. All right. Do we have further questions or comments? So just continuing on this thread about kids needing to get answers for human who love them or at least care about them. I think that it's generally important when we think about how the future with AI that we think about not only present AI capabilities, but how AIs are likely to become better in the future. And there's a limiting case here where Nick Bostrom, in his latest book, Deep Utopia, he asks us to play along with a thought experiment that AI can do everything that we can do and can do it more efficient and better and so on and so forth. And he seems to be serious about this, including all kinds of educational capabilities, in particular, including the ability to make the student feel cared about in the appropriate way and so on. Would you be willing to entertain such ideas, or do you think that there are fundamental roadblocks to that?
Yeah, so I haven't read Deep Utopia yet. I know it's when it came out and it's somewhere on my list, but I can entertain that idea. I can, follow the thread of AI actually being able to approximate care, like care in its own way. But I think that the main issue here for me is the different quality of that care, different quality of its experience of the world compared to what we as humans have. And I think even if AI were more efficient and capable of doing so many things that we are currently doing, where it could functionally replace human teachers, I think the issue of students need to relate to someone else's experience is a significant roadblock. You see, in the sense that I like the example that I use in another paper that human teachers are not just there to transmit information, of course, but for example, they serve as role models. I discuss the issue of democratic education and what it means to be an active citizen, etc., etc. And they are an embodied living example of someone who uses their knowledge to share it with others, right? To help others develop their character and participate in social practices. And even if AI could do those things functionally, just the fact of it not being human, I think there would be a certain, first person cognitive issue with, how can you relate to that? Can an AI be a role model for me in the same way that a human being could?
It seems that today a lot of young people are using chatbots from character.ai and so on as friends, therapists, and even romantic partners. I'm not saying that I'm super enthusiastic about this development, but maybe it's suggestive that AI will be more capable than we expected of doing these kinds of
Yes,
things.
so yeah, I can see your point here, but even in those examples, you can see that those relationships are qualitatively different than relationships with humans, right? And we could say that this is, an issue of the different capabilities of AI today. But at the same time, there is something about the users themselves that also recognize that they are not interacting with another person, and that makes them treat the AI and relate to it in a different way that they would to a person. And I think this is not it's not a question of capabilities, but the knowledge of it being a ontologically different type of agent, being consciousness, whatever you want to call it down the road, right? This is going to have a significant impact on our ability to, well, care for AI or being cared for by AI.
Yeah. Now you're using repeatedly the term different, and it sounds like you mean different also to mean worse.
No,
But maybe
not necessarily, but I think a good analogy would be our relationship to animals.
yes.
We can recognize, I can recognize my dog as conscious. I can recognize my dog as caring and loving, and having many wonderful capabilities as well. And in some respects, being a better version of my own capabilities, like loyalty, etc. Right? We ascribe to dogs, but my knowledge of my dog's different status, and I'm not saying like lower status, but just different living embodied experience, right? Changes the way I relate to my dog as opposed to how I would to a human being. So should there ever arise this, conscious, super intelligent AI, etc., it would have a fundamentally, well, again, different experience than what we have. And I'm not saying better, not saying better or worse, but just not relatable, or maybe we could relate to it in some ways, but again, not in the same ways as we do to humans. And relationships with humans are fundamental to our development.
Okay. I've been talking too much here, so I again invite the audience to engage with questions and comments. So if no one is ready to take up that challenge, then I think that we can round this off. I thank all of you for joining. I thank Michał for an interesting talk and very interesting discussion. Let's give one more round.
Thank you for your attention and the questions. Thank you.
And I hereby declare the